Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Weekly News. I'm Derek Levasseur.
And I'm Stephanie Harlow.
Here with another episode. Before we get into it, because it's a pretty sad case we're going to be talking about, we do have something that might make you a little happy.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to say it?
I mean, it's your baby.
So we have new Criminal Coffee merch that just dropped, and I wouldn't say I designed it, but I did.
No, you were like doing your own thing. I was watching emails go back and forth. You were very specific.
I was very specific. I wanted, more summery stuff, but also because I'm a big person, I like to layer, because I'm constantly like getting cold and then I get hot and then I get cold and then I get hot. So I like to layer. So I wanted not only some like t-shirts and like thinner materials and like crop tops and stuff and tank tops, because we haven't had any of those, but I wanted a zip up. I love a zip up. So now I'm so pumped about it. Like, all of the things that I wanted. We have a cropped tee. And listen, I want this cropped tee in every single color, specifically the blue. And I think it's called like a Shiraz color, but it's like a maroon. But there's a blue color, there's a Shiraz, charcoal, and black. Want it. We have cropped tank tops also in a few different colors. We have regular tank tops, and we have an amazing fleece zip-up hoodie, and it comes in that great color that everybody loved in our pullovers, the oatmeal heather. It also comes in plum and black, and I love it because it's got the Criminal Coffee words on the sort of the breast area, but then on the sleeve it has the Criminal Coffee fingerprint coffee bean, which I love. I just love how these were designed. I love the colors. I love how they look. So go to the website, check them out. Just go to criminalcoffeeco.com. Head over. There's like tabs. It'll say coffee, universe, fight crime, and then merch. Hit merch, and it's going to bring you to the new stuff. And then a bunch of our other stuff is there too. Our coffee mugs, our sweatshirts, our t-shirts, the pullovers, the crew neck sweatshirt. So everything's there. The hats. I love the hats. I have the Criminal Coffee hat in like every color. I love it. So go check those out. And that's it.
Yeah, it looks great. Really looks good. I'll probably go with the fleece. I don't think I can rock a crop top. I
think you should.
I mean, I could. I won't, but I could.
But you should.
Right. We're open to everything over here. You know what I mean? You do you. You want to rock a crop top? You do your thing.
I do.
You can. I'm just saying, for all my fellas out there, you want to buy a crop top, I'm not hating on you.
A man in a crop top can be quite enticing.
If they have the body for it. Just saying. I can go one way or the other. So choose your choice wisely, I guess. I don't know.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Maybe if it's not there, if it's off season, maybe go with the fleece jacket. Zip that bad boy up.
Zip it up. You wear cropped up underneath, though.
You could do that as well. All right. So on a more serious note, sad news out of Oklahoma City. On August 16, 2023, 28-year-old Ruben Armendariz took the lives of his wife, 29-year-old Cassandra Flores, and their 3 young children, ages 9, 5, and 2, before turning the gun on himself in the front yard of his father-in-law's home. Really sad story. And like a coward, he takes the lives of his family members, and then instead of facing the consequences, takes the easy way out,
or just taking his own life, right?
Yeah, well, that would be the best route if you're going to go that way. But yeah, he's a coward, and clearly something wrong with him. So a lot of specifics to this. It's a relatively new, obviously August 16th, but we're going to give you all the details that we have.
So from what I can tell, Ruben and Cassandra, they'd been married since she was 17 years old. So he would have been 16 years old because she's a year older than him. But at the time of this crime, when this took place, they were separated. She and the children were actually living with her father, and he, unfortunately, was the person who discovered this horribly gruesome scene. Now, law enforcement has said that they haven't identified a motive yet. I mean, oftentimes in these situations, the motive's pretty clear. It's usually jealousy. It's usually if I can't have them, no one else can kind of thing. And Jennifer Johnson, who's a close family friend, she did reveal that Armendariz was very depressed and had become more and more fixated on Cassandra. Jennifer Johnson said, quote, "She said that he was bothering her a lot and was more worried about her than the kids," end quote. As I said, if I can't have you, nobody else can. And the kids in question were 9-year-old Hillary, 5-year-old Damaris, and 2-year-old Matthias. They all died from gunshot wounds to the head. Cassandra and 2 of the children were pronounced dead inside the home at the scene. Ruben and the 3rd child were rushed to the hospital where they later died. And Jose Flores, who's Cassandra's brother, he revealed to the media that his father, Cassandra's father also, received a call from Ruben Wednesday night. And Jose said, quote, "The only time my dad goes out, the only time he went out with a friend, Ruben called him and said, 'I messed up. When my dad got there, they were all gone.'" End quote. Now, there doesn't appear to be a history of domestic abuse or domestic disputes at this home. Law enforcement has claimed they've never responded to any calls like that for this family at this home before. And those who knew the family claimed that the tragedy seemed to come out of nowhere, which I think often it does because this is an internal thing that Ruben was dealing with. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Cassandra was probably the one who wanted out of the relationship. She didn't want to be with him anymore, and he could not accept that. But I will say this has been happening a lot lately, this family annihilation situation, a lot lately. Like, I feel like every time which is every day, I'm pulling up, I'm looking at the current news, and there's something like this happening. And as a man and as a father and a husband, do you have a different insight into this? Do you have a different perspective into this that would help us sort of understand where this is coming from or why this may be becoming more and more prevalent as of late?
I really don't. I mean, the only thing I can say, do have some opinions on it, but as far as understanding what perspective he'd be coming from, I don't get it. I will say that I do think with all of these school shootings and other situations where you have individuals taking the lives of the people around them before taking their own life, like you have these copycats, right? Like it's now prevalent. It's now I hate to say it, but like the popular choice to not only kill yourself, but take others with you before doing it. It's like this more recent thing or more recent trend that's been occurring because I feel like these individuals are seeing others do it. And they're following suit. What I don't understand, and maybe I don't, obviously, and I don't like to use this as an excuse, but obviously there's some undertone of a mental health issue here. What I don't understand, and I'm fortunate enough to not be in this position that this individual was in, but I just don't understand how, if you're feeling that way, why there's not a more cognizant attempt or more conscious effort to at least try getting help first. Like, I know you said there's no information or they don't have any documentation that there was domestic violence in the home, but it also, I think if he had been being treated by someone, they probably would have said that. He was being seen by, a therapist or a doctor or whatever, and that doesn't appear to be the case either. So this didn't happen overnight. This is obviously an evolution where it started off bad, it got worse, and I just don't understand how an individual, male, female, doesn't matter, goes through this and doesn't at least attempt to rectify this with professional help, medication, whatever it might be. How do you rationalize this being the best way to handle it? And like you said, if you're going to do it, if you're that upset with your life and you're just unable to process, obviously I'm not condoning suicide here, but why are you killing the people that you love before yourself? I don't understand what the rationale is. I guess the argument could be made, well, they're clearly not thinking in the right mind state, Derek. And so in their head, it makes perfect sense. But they're not thinking like you and I. I get it. I don't know. It's hard for me to process it because not even as a father, but as a human being, it doesn't make sense. What I will say is that even though there hasn't been a documented history of domestic violence, whether it was mental or physical, I think you would even agree, that doesn't mean it wasn't occurring.
No.
And I promise you know people in your own life. I'm looking at everybody out there right now that you think on the surface everything is fine, and there are things going on behind closed doors that you're not aware of. And all you can do is be there for your friends and family if you have any indication that something may be going on, and ask questions. Hey, are you okay? Is everything all right in the home? Even if it's just something subtle, it doesn't hurt to ask. If they come back and say, nope, everything's fine, well, then it is what it is. And as far as the person in the home, if you're experiencing something like this, whether it's your husband or your wife, if it starts off with something innocent, maybe the throwing of, a piece of property or pushing a chair over or something, and you start to notice a progression where it's becoming more violent or even more consistent, it's happening more often, understand that more than likely it's going to continue to progress. It's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to get worse. It may escalate to something like this in 6 months. It may take 6 years, but it can get to this point. So the best thing that you can do for yourself, and if you have children, is to help that loved one get the help they need. And if they don't respond to it, remove yourself from that situation to potentially prevent something like this from happening. I know I have to qualify and say this, which is it's ridiculous. As always, not victim blaming here, but it is something where I don't want to see this continue to happen. And there were probably some signs that this individual wasn't doing that well.
Yeah,
this
but
didn't
I
happen
mean,
overnight.
she got out. She moved out. She was living with her father. Her and
That's
the kids
right.
were living with her father.
That's right.
So even that's the scary thing. Even when you leave, even when you say enough is enough, you separate yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. These assholes will still come after you and still find you because
It's very true.
for me, the major thing, and I've studied a lot of these cases because I don't want to say they fascinate me. They certainly don't. But I want to understand. And the majority of these cases are usually triggered by the woman finally saying enough and leaving. That's when it happens, when she says enough and leaves and he loses control. So even if she wasn't happy with him, even if she didn't love him, even if the relationship was terrible, while he had her there in his home, in his sights, he could still control her. He could still project this image of a perfect family to the world. But when she left, that self-image and that external image, the way people saw him, the way people saw them as a family unit was shattered. And I think there's an ego thing there. There's a huge control factor there. And I mean, they did a study and they actually found that familicide offenders were mostly highly educated men with psychological problems, depression, self-destructiveness, and substance abuse issues. And past violent behavior and unsteady social relationships were also prevalent. But in a lot of these situations, there was no signs at all. There was we saw it with Chris Watts. Everyone afterwards said, I can't believe this, that he seemed like the perfect husband. They seemed like the perfect family. And you'll hear that a lot too. But as soon as the woman or the wife in the situation says, we're not a perfect family, I'm sick of pretending to be, I don't want to be a part of this charade anymore. And she makes a move to sever the ties, whether it be filing for divorce, talking to a divorce lawyer, actually physically moving and leaving the household or having him move and leave the household. When that happens, the lack of control and the almost feeling of like spiraling, like I'm not like making these puppets move anymore to the beat of my own drum. That's almost what will send them over the edge. So it's like you just never know. And that's what I think is the most scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in this situation, like you said, she had already removed herself physically from the location.
Yeah.
I wonder if there was still communication going on, if they were still, I don't know, still seeing each other, whatever it might be. But it's one of those things where, in my experience as a patrolman, it was quite often where I would respond to a domestic violence scene, and first time you go there, it's a husband and wife, and the wife will have a handprint on her face, and we obviously at that point, we establish primary aggressor, we arrest him, but 6 months later, I see them out at dinner together, or they're, walking the street together, walking with their dog, and, I'm assuming they have talked about it, and she has rationalized the situation and come up with an excuse for him. And I obviously don't say nothing, it's none of my business, but then, 6 months later, a year later, I'm back there because he got drunk again or something, and now she's got a broken nose. Right. And you look at her and you're there and she's going, I know. And I'm done this time. And then 6 months later, I'm back again. Now she's got a broken rib, and it just keeps progressing. Very rare have I seen a situation where I find a man or woman in a situation where they're being physically abused, and
it just stops.
It turns out to be good. And my personal opinion, if this offends you, too bad. It's not a gender thing for me. I'm just talking as a man myself. There is zero situations for me where you can justify as a man putting your hand on another woman. I don't even care if she slaps you first, unless she's a bodybuilder. If you're in the position where as the man of the home and you can't mentally or physically control yourself enough to not put your hands on a woman, you're not a man in my eyes. And so For me, that's a zero tolerance policy. You get one shot at it and that's it for me. You'd be gone. And I hope that most of you out there would be able to do the same thing because you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. And by the way, if you're a man in the situation where the woman puts her hands on you and you do have that restraint to not respond, then you should remove yourself from that situation as well, because it'll probably happen again. But only speaking from my role as a man, zero tolerance policy for me under any circumstance. And if you're with someone who puts their hands on you, definitely recommend reaching out to the resources in your area. I can tell you that at your local police department, you don't even have to speak to anyone. I believe it's a requirement. I know it is in Rhode Island, where there's domestic violence pamphlets and information packets in the lobby where you can kind of not discreetly get in there. I don't want to say it's completely confidential, but you can walk in there, grab the pamphlet, whatever you might need. You can make it really simple. Go in there, ask for, hey, what time's the curfew or whatever. Make it for something else. And on the way out, grab a pamphlet. It has all the information you need. Then there's victims advocates that work for the states that you live in, and they can help you discreetly if you're looking for some advice on how to get out of the situation in a way that may be the safest way possible for you and your loved ones if you have children. And these people do it every day, so they probably have some really good advice. And you don't have to go to the extreme of calling the police on your loved one if you don't want to go that route. So there's definitely resources available. But I guess my takeaway would be is if you find yourself in a situation like this, even if it seems minor at the time, understand the history behind it and the statistics behind it. It's probably going to get worse. So while you have that opportunity, remove that person from your life. They're not worth it. That's kind of my final thought on it. It doesn't always end this way, but even if there's a small possibility, you got to go. Exactly. It's too late at that point.
Yeah, that's the really tough part. And I wanted to, before we sign off, I wanted to quickly, because we were talking about, earlier we were talking about just because there's no reported domestic violence doesn't mean that there wasn't domestic violence. And there was actually this study done by Jacqueline C. Campbell, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins, and she found that 91% of the perpetrators of this family annihilation were men, and a history of domestic violence was common, right? So a 12-city study of such cases found that intimate partner violence had occurred in 70% of them, despite the fact that only 25% of prior domestic violence appeared in arrest records. So
there you go.
Take that in. 70% of these family annihilation cases, there was 70% of the time domestic violence, but only 25% of it was reported. And another interesting kind of caveat to that is that usually they don't have, the men who do this, they don't have a past criminal history. So there will be incidences of domestic violence in 70% of these cases, but they don't necessarily have a past criminal history, which is interesting. These men fly underneath the radar. They're law-abiding citizens, usually have good jobs, educated, seem to be the perfect family men, and then something snaps. And it's usually about control or loss of control, power, the desire to retain and regain power at whatever cost. They have mental health issues, maybe a personality disorder, things like that. So, and I just feel like it's happening so much more now than it ever was. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, why more now than before? What has changed about society? What has changed about humanity? What has changed that is making these men feel so much more emboldened to do these kinds of things? And if you guys have any, obviously nobody has the answer to that, but if you have any speculations, theories, thoughts, we would like to know.
So I would say this. I feel like what I'm hearing is that there's not a singular issue that can fix this problem. But I do think every case is different. And there's different circumstances for every individual incident that we're talking about, whether it's a school shooter or a situation like this. And I feel like in order to suppress the amount of times that this is occurring, and it'll never be perfect, there are multiple things that probably have to be done, right? There needs to be more initiative on the victim's part where they're helping themselves by seeking out the help that may be able to facilitate them removing themselves from that situation in an amicable manner. I think there's a better medical resources available for individuals who are feeling a certain way so that they can maybe get the help that they need to rectify the issue before it gets to be this serious. I do think some people, again, I'm not just talking about husbands who are killing their wives here. I'm also talking about school shootings, all these things. I think we can have better background checks, better processing as far as the ability to obtain a firearm. But there's a lot of things. And I think there also can be improvement on behalf of law enforcement where if we're going to a scene or we're observing something, maybe not necessarily a crime being reported, officers can be better trained to notice the subtleties of someone who may be in a domestic violence situation without it being overtly obvious what's taking place, so that we can be more proactive in preventing it from happening and maybe find a way where it looks like the victim doesn't necessarily want law enforcement involved, but maybe we can act on it by getting social workers involved. So we can make contacts to those individuals and say, hey, this is something, we want to put something on paper. Maybe this is a situation where you would be better suited for it, as opposed to bringing us in because it's not necessarily a criminal matter at this point. I just think there's so many things that can be done, and we can't just pinpoint it to one particular problem. There's a lot of different things from a lot of different entities and organizations where we all have to make adjustments to hopefully, cause these issues to happen less frequently.
I was going to say that, you know how like some battered women's shelters are very anonymous, like you can go there and nobody. So obviously, like there doesn't even have to be domestic violence. You're with somebody, you leave them, you have a sense, a gut instinct. Like, I don't feel safe. I don't know what he's going to do, because I'm sure there was conversations where, like she said, he was obsessed with me. He's more concerned about me than the kids. There's things that are happening, red flags that are happening that make you feel like, I don't know if it's safe for him to know where I am right now for 30 days, 60 days, however long it takes for this person to hopefully work through whatever they have going on, because they cannot find you to take out their compulsion on you. So there should be like homes, maybe places that these women and their children can go for a period of time where no one knows where they are, where they cannot be found.
Yeah. My city was only 1.2 square miles, and we had 2 of those homes. Yeah. In our city, where in police.
But so often they're full. You can't get in there right away.
That is true. We've had that.
That's a big issue.
So what happens is when someone comes in, usually they'll come into the police department. They're not necessarily a criminal complaint, but we'll have a victim's advocate come in. Actually, in my department, we had someone on staff who was part of that organization. It was funded through the government to pay for that person, but they would be called in, and if there's not a spot available at our local facility, at one of the local homes, they would find a home in one of the other surrounding communities. But you're right, it's a great point. There's a lot of resources out there, and that's what we're hitting on, right? There are resources available for both victims,
but there needs to be more.
There always has. I mean, that is a whole nother thing. Like, there has to be more of a lot of things. We don't have a lot of shit that people. I mean, the fact that we have so many homeless people out there still is just crazy to me. But again, opening a can of worms, it's like a macro government, the society as a whole, like how screwed up we really are. But I digress. There are resources available to the victims out there or potential victims. There are also resources available for someone who feels like maybe they're at a point where they're not in complete control of their thoughts and their actions, and may need someone. There's nothing wrong with going and get help. I'm not trying to demonize it. My problem is when
I'm demonizing men like this. Absolutely. I don't even care. I don't care what the hell's going on in your head or your emotions or your little man heart. The second you're like, I'm going to kill my wife and my children, you should just kill yourself.
Do you think I was saying that, like, I'm not demonizing these thoughts?
Oh, what were you not demonizing?
Mental health. Mental health.
Of course not. No. Nobody would ever think you would do that.
Needing help with something. If you're at a point where you can't control, or you're having thoughts that you can't control, or physical actions that you feel like you're not in complete control of what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with seeking help to do that. I went through some traumatic things at the police department, and I've sought help for that. It was extremely advantageous, and it allowed me to continue to be a police officer for many years after these traumatic incidents. So I'm a big proponent of it. My point is, the fact that this guy got to this point, my opinion, my unofficial opinion is, it didn't happen overnight. This was a progression, and maybe if he had sought the help that in the beginning, we wouldn't have been at this point where we've had 4 lives lost that should still be with us. Maybe he would be fine, or if anything, it would just be him who's no longer with us. So I think
there is a stigma about mental health, especially with men or amongst men.
Yeah. Of course there is. Yeah. I think of course there is, and that's why when it does get to a point where it's out of control and something like this can happen. So thoughts are with the family. There's nothing we can say that's going to bring them back. I think, as always, even with Crime Weekly, we can't reverse history, right? We can't go back. We don't have a time machine. All we can do is remember the ones we've lost and try and take something out of it to prevent it from happening again. What can we learn from it? It's pragmatic, but what can we learn from it as a community to try to prevent it from happening again? Just like the history books, right? We've learned how things were done before us. And at the time when they were happening, the people who were doing it thought it was the right thing to do. And as we've learned, a lot of what was happening in our society back in the day was obviously very wrong. And we should continue to learn on a micro level when these things are occurring, what happened. Let's dissect it. Let's figure out what the root of the issue was and put things in place that can prevent it from happening again. I think that's all we can really do. Prevent it from happening to me, prevent it from happening to you, and prevent it from happening to the people watching and listening to this, so that if you're someone, and I'm sure there is, who's going through something like this right now or has in the past, maybe you see this and decide to act on it because this strikes a chord with you. And that's really all we can hope for, is that this saves someone else's life.
Yeah, it's just very sad. I'm very sad.
100%. Terrible situation. I hate ending it like this, but any final words from you? I kind of went on a spiel there at the end, but anything from you?
No.
All right, guys. Well, we hope everyone stays safe out there. We're going to get ready to record an episode of Crime Weekly. We will see you later this week. Audio for Crime Weekly will be out on Friday. We have a new case we're starting. And if you're someone who's strictly watching on YouTube, which Crime Weekly News is just on YouTube at this point, the new episode of Crime Weekly will be out on Sunday. As Stephanie said at the top of the episode, Criminal Coffee merch, new line, now available. Go ahead on over to criminalcoffeeco.com, check it out. And as always, if you made it to the end of the video, make sure you leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, I don't know what you're doing, but like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know you're here. We'd love to hear from you. Everyone stay safe out there. We will see you next week.
Bye.